After my divorce, I received a call from my ex-husband who, unbelievably, had married my sister after years of no contact. We are incredibly happy. We couldn't afford a wedding because I had to pay you compensation. But that makes us even happier. On the other end of the phone, my ex-husband laughed loudly as he spoke. Compared to us, you're drowning in debt, aren't you? Hearing this, I sighed deeply. Drowning in debt? Who are you confusing me with? 3 seconds later, I mercilessly confronted my ex-husband with reality, turning his face pale. My name is Erica. I am working at a company now, living comfortably with some financial ease. Blessed with friends and a rewarding job. The only thing I wasn't blessed with, perhaps, was my family. I was the younger daughter. My sister Tracy had a face like a model and was adored as a lady by both our relatives and family. Because of that, I, not as cute as my sister, was hardly cared for by our parents or relatives. The only ones who paid attention to me were my grandparents. Despite my grandparents' repeated warnings, my parents indulged only in Tracy, saying, "Just because your sister is beautiful, don't be jealous of her," further alienating me. Eventually, my parents came to believe that I harbored an intense rivalry against my sister. However, I preferred spending time reading picture books at home over being surrounded by people and playing outside like my sister. Tracy used to drag me outside to play against my will, saying, "Erica doesn't have friends, so I'll introduce her to mine." Naturally, these were not people I knew, nor were they of the same age, willing to play with me. As a result, whenever I was taken outside by my sister, I couldn't talk to anyone and always felt lonely. Looking back, my sister probably enjoyed seeing me without anyone around. Even Tracy's friends would just watch me from afar, instructed by my sister not to bother with me. Even as an elementary student, Tracy subtly tried to mentally corner me. While Tracy was showered with affection and expectations from our relatives and parents, she likely vented her stress on me. The dynamics between me and Tracy drastically changed during middle school. In my first year of middle school, a third-year senior confessed to me. I hardly knew him and declined, but Tracy might have felt her pride wounded by this. Actually, this senior, originally liked by Tracy, had rejected her confession with, "I have someone I like," which turned out to be me, leading Tracy to slap me upon her return home. I was clueless about Tracy's feelings for the senior, unable to understand why she was angry at me, standing there dumbfounded. As I was in shock, Tracy cried to our parents, claiming, "Erica stole the person I liked. She's the worst." Still not understanding the situation, my parents sided with Tracy without considering my side, reprimanding me harshly. "I always thought you resented Tracy. To think you'd steal her love interest. Such a despicable act doesn't befit our family. It's not just your looks that make you less attractive than Tracy, it's your personality too." Despite my innocence, I was blamed and ultimately driven out of the house. Fortunately, my grandparents lived nearby, and I ran to their house in tears. My grandparents were furious with Tracy and my parents for hurting me and kicking me out. However, my parents declared they could no longer tolerate my supposed threats to Tracy, saying, "We've forgiven you as a child until now. But if you intend to harm our precious Tracy further, we cannot raise you anymore." My grandparents, finding it absurd to abandon a middle schooler, decided to take me in, realizing that returning to a home with my parents and sister would be worse for me. When my grandparents went to collect my belongings, Tracy had already destroyed everything in my room, leaving nothing intact. My grandparents demanded compensation from my parents for everything. Although my parents reluctantly provided for my necessities during middle school, it was clear they didn't want to. From high school onwards, my grandparents supported me financially, allowing me to attend a school without Tracy. I studied hard for my grandparents, who took me in, and managed to get into university with top grades. Rumors have it that Tracy spent her high school years playing around, failing all her university entrance exams and eventually giving up on higher education, not wanting to retake the exams. Tracy didn't seek employment elsewhere but worked at an apparel shop. By the time I graduated from university, I had moved on from caring about my parents or Tracy. After joining a company, I met Nick, who would later become my husband. His first impression was of a very sincere person. With encouragement from those around us, I started dating him. And we were considered a perfect couple. Nick proposed to me, and I accepted. I know you've had a rough time with your family, but I think we should at least greet them for our marriage. It's the least we can do. I've talked to my parents, and they agree that greeting your parents is just common courtesy. However, we disagreed on greeting my parents for the marriage. I couldn't forgive my parents for favoring my sister over me and kicking me out when I was in middle school. So I didn't want to meet them, even for marriage greetings. Nick insisted, saying it was necessary because they are my parents. I've told you before, Nick, my parents kicked me out when I was in middle school. And they believed my sister when she said I stole her boyfriend. I explained the situation to Nick again, but he persisted, believing it was the right thing to do. Nick was well-intentioned. He grew up in a family with strong bonds and surrounded by friends who shared similar backgrounds. So he couldn't understand our estranged family relationship. If we have to meet anyone, meet my grandparents. They raised you, right? Of course, I'll meet them. But I want to meet your parents too. Even if you say so. Just one meeting. Fine, I understand. At that moment, I realized it was a mistake to let his enthusiasm sway me into bringing him to my family home. When I arrived at my family home with Nick, only my sister was there despite having told them I was introducing my fiancé. Where are Mom and Dad? I asked, to which my sister responded. Considering it's you, they thought you were lying about having a fiancé. So, they went out. You've always been a liar, so they didn't believe you this time either. I'm not the liar here. If anything, it's my sister who has always been deceitful. Nick was surprised too, but he still politely greeted my sister, Tracy. Tracy, on her part, greeted Nick with a bright smile, showing more interest in talking to him than to me. Eventually, my parents returned, and we managed to complete the marriage greeting. However, at this time, my sister Tracy was concocting an unbelievable scheme. After Nick and I visited my family home to introduce him, I started to feel Nick gradually distancing himself from me. I was oblivious until Tracy spilled the beans, but during this time, Nick had been secretly meeting with my sister and our parents. And then, my sister and parents had been feeding him lies about me, telling him that marrying a woman like me would be the end of his life, effectively trying to dissuade him from marrying me. Well, in the end, Nick and I did get married and became a couple. The meddling from Tracy and my parents continued even after Nick and I were married. Gradually, Nick began to believe their lies, and he started not coming home. Eventually, I stopped receiving any responses from Nick. The one who contacted me to suggest we should get a divorce was Nick's mother. I want you and Nick to get a divorce. Ever since I heard about your refusal to greet our parents, I thought it was best not to marry someone like you. When I thought I couldn't get in touch with Nick, his mother suddenly delivered the divorce decree. Right after that, I received a message from my sister Tracy saying, "Serves you right. Your husband is going to marry me. This is what you get for trying to marry before me." Along with photos of her and Nick looking cozy together. Moreover, among those photos were some that clearly only a couple would take, revealing a level of intimacy. I immediately realized that Nick and Tracy had been in a relationship behind my back. And Nick had believed the lies my sister and parents told him, thinking I was the bad one. I could have just faded into the background, but my anger wouldn't allow it. So I took the evidence of the affair to a lawyer. As a result, I was able to demand compensation from Nick and Tracy for their affair. Both of them complained, "Why do we have to pay?" And both sets of parents were angry, saying, "The bad woman is her, not our children." The lawyer could only give a wry smile in response. From my perspective, it was only natural for Nick and Tracy, who had done wrong, to pay compensation. I had no intention of waiving the compensation. Eventually, Nick and his parents managed to come up with the money, and they paid the compensation in full. Don't bother me anymore. But really, that's my line. Once the compensation payment was settled, I deleted Nick and Tracy's contact information, intending to forget about them and their parents and enrich my own life. Years later, I continued living alone, with no inclination toward marriage. My savings kept growing as I focused on my work. Just when I had completely forgotten about Nick and Tracy, an unknown number called my phone. Thinking it was work, I answered the phone to hear, "We are so incredibly happy. We couldn't have a wedding because we had to pay you compensation. But that has made us even happier." I instantly knew it was Nick, who had divorced me through his mother and quickly remarried my sister. As I thought, "Ugh." Nick laughed heartily on the other end. "Compared to us, I hear you're drowning in debt." Hearing that, I let out a deep sigh. Drowning in debt? Who are you confusing me with? Huh? Aren't you the one drowning in debt? That's a story about my sister. What? I sighed in frustration. You married my sister Tracy and now live with her, right? Then you should know. My sister doesn't work and can't do any housework. I think she used to have house cleaning services at home. House cleaning? I've never ordered that. Whenever I come home, everything is clean. And there's always food on the table. Have you ever seen Tracy actually cooking from scratch? No. Considering Nick married Tracy right after divorcing me, it's been a few years. The fact that all this time, Nick has never seen his wife cooking shows how oblivious he is to the person he married. Actually, I've never seen it. When I occasionally come home early, we always go out to eat because she says she's been working hard on housework. So, you've never seen it. My sister has never worked or done housework because our parents spoiled her at home. Everything was done by our mother back when we were living at home. Wait a minute. I can't believe what you're saying. Stop making things up. Saying that, Nick hung up the phone. It's rude to call someone, refuse to believe what they say, and then end the call unilaterally. I always thought he was impolite. However, I didn't immediately delete Nick's contact from my phone. I could tell over the phone that he was turning pale as he listened to me. I knew something interesting would come from him if I just waited. 3 days later, Nick called again. What's going on? Just like you said, when I asked Tracy to cook in front of me, she stubbornly refused to cook. Instead, she just reheated leftovers from the night before, and then stormed back to her parents' house when I pressed her about it. What do you mean, what's going on? I only told you the truth. My sister has never done housework or had a job. You just never noticed. Upon hearing my words, Nick groaned on the other end of the phone. Yet, observing how Nick instantly changes his attitude when he begins to doubt someone, it's clear he hasn't matured at all since our divorce years ago. Yesterday, I checked my bank account. More money has been withdrawn from my account each month than I thought. Huh? You let Tracy manage the money? Are you an idiot? My sister has never worked, so she can't manage money, let alone balance income and expenses. Nick probably had a decent salary, so maybe they hadn't struggled financially until now. Or perhaps Tracy started keeping a household ledger and calculated expenses so Nick wouldn't suspect anything. Either way, Nick hasn't grown up at all since our divorce. Wait, you said Tracy was the one in debt, right? What's that all about? I reluctantly decided to talk about it, thinking that Nick wasn't aware of this story. You know my grandfather runs a business, right? I know. Your dad's the next president, right? Wait, has your grandfather retired and your dad's the president now? My father was fired by my grandfather. What? You didn't know, did you? 2 years ago, Tracy got involved with a married man. When his wife found out, Tracy had to pay damages. But there was no money at home. So my father tried to use the company's money and got caught by my grandfather. What? 2 years ago? That was after Tracy and I got married. It seems Nick was unaware of Tracy's affair, which I knew about. Likely, my parents did everything they could to protect Tracy and keep it from Nick. I wonder what Nick's parents would think if they knew. They believed Tracy and my parents over me, convinced I was the villain. Now, their son's money has been squandered, and unbeknownst to them, their son has been cheated on. If I had stayed married to you, Nick, we wouldn't have had to worry about money at all. And unlike you and Tracy, I would never have cheated. It seems you chose the wrong person to trust. Right. Even though I heard about it, you didn't know. By the way, Tracy's affair partner paid compensation and then divorced his wife. He's still seeing Tracy. Does that mean she's still cheating on me behind my back? Exactly. I wasn't planning to listen to Nick and Tracy's affairs, but there are always nosy people around. Someone has been telling me about Tracy hiring house cleaning and homemaking services while Nick is away. So, when Tracy said I was drowning in debt, oh, that must be about her and my parents. They planned to pay the compensation but couldn't touch the company's money. And since my father became unemployed, now it's just my mom and dad working just enough to support themselves. Tracy had to take out loans to pay the compensation in one lump sum. So, the one with debt isn't Erica but Tracy. What's she planning to do about that debt? What do you mean, what's she planning to do? Since Tracy isn't earning, she'll have to pay off her debts with her working husband's money. What? Nick, why are you surprised now? This should have been obvious. I'm going to divorce Tracy. I had no idea she was like this. I was astounded. Nick fully believes my words just because after confronting her, my sister fled back to our parents' house. And he discovered that more money than expected had vanished from his bank account. This reminds me of how Nick suddenly stopped believing in me years ago. His behavior hasn't changed at all. However, well, staying with someone like Tracy will never lead to anything good. It's better to divorce her. Surely, Tracy and my parents will lose their easy source of money once Nick leaves her. Erica. You're still single and working, right? How much do you have in savings? You wouldn't have a problem living with me, right? If it's a choice between marrying you and staying single, I'd choose to stay single without hesitation. Goodbye. I hung up the phone and blocked Nick's number. I've saved up about $600,000, but I have no intention of telling him about it. Nor do I plan to get back together with him. After realizing getting back with me was impossible, Nick still tried to make Tracy pay for deceiving him by first investigating her affair and demanding she pays compensation for cheating. However, when Tracy's parents, who adore her, intervened with a husband should forgive his wife's affair, Nick's parents got involved too. The audacity. Pay the compensation and let's divorce, was shouted in front of the family home after a long argument. Eventually, they divorced, and compensation was paid, but now Nick and Tracy. After all the cheating drama and the fact that Tracy was once married to her sister's ex-husband, are left feeling embarrassed in their social circles. As for me, since my father was fired from the company, I've been welcomed into my grandfather's business for successor training. I'm working hard every day to be recognized as a worthy successor. In gratitude to my grandfather who never abandoned me.